Spring of 1936, Red River County. I was standing in my sawmill yard when the county assessor rode up with foreclosure papers and a smirk I wanted to wipe clean off his face. Wasn't a surprise. I'd known it was coming since the bank took my brother's land 2 years back, and he took his own life 3 days after. What I didn't know was that by sunset, I'd be breaking every rule I ever lived by, and by dawn, the whole county would be deciding whether I was a fool or the only man left who understood what honor actually meant. See, about an hour after that assessor left, a woman and two hollow-eyed children showed up in a wagon asking directions to their foreclosed farm, the one the bank just gave me. The sawmill yard was empty by the time Silas Brennan walked back from the county office, foreclosure notice folded in his coat pocket. He'd expected it. What he hadn't expected was the crowd waiting outside Carmichael's general store. Must have been 20 men, maybe more, standing in a loose half-circle. At the center stood Tom Hargrove, the banksman, holding up a ledger book like it was scripture. "Brennan owes 3 months back on timber contracts," Hargrove announced, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Bank's being generous, even giving him till month's end." Silas kept walking. Wasn't any point in stopping. "You hear me, Brennan?" Hargrove called out. "Or you gone deaf along with broke?" A few men laughed. Not mean laughter exactly, just the nervous kind that comes when folks don't know what else to do. Silas stopped, turned slow. His hands stayed loose at his sides. "I heard you, Tom. Then you got something to say about it?" Silas looked at him steady. Hargrove was younger, maybe 35, wearing a suit that cost more than Silas made in half a year. Behind him stood Sheriff Cutler, arms crossed, not smiling, but not stopping it either. "I got nothing you'd want to hear," Silas said. "That's what I figured." Hargrove snapped the ledger shut. "Man can't pay his debts, he ought to have the dignity to clear out quiet." The cabin sat in a clearing about a quarter-mile off the main road, backed up against a stand of hickory trees. It wasn't much. 3 rooms, a stone chimney, a porch that sagged on one side. But it was mine, paid for with 10 years of sawmill wages and built with my own hands on weekends. Mrs. Macklin climbed down from the wagon slow, like her legs had forgotten how to hold weight. The girl, Emma, stayed close beside her, one hand clutching her mother's skirt, the other holding a cloth doll with half its stuffing gone. "There's a pump around back," I said, lifting their trunk from the wagon bed. Wasn't heavy. Told me everything I needed to know about what they'd lost. "Water's good. I check the line every spring." Mrs. Macklin, she'd told me on the ride to call her Anne, nodded but didn't speak. Her eyes moved across the property, taking inventory. The woodpile, the chicken coop, the garden plot I hadn't planted yet, measuring, I figured, whether this was safety or just another kind of trap. Inside, I set the trunk down near the back bedroom. "You and Emma can take this room. I'll bunk out here by the stove." "Mr. Brennan." "Silas." She stopped, corrected herself. "Silas, we can't take your bed." "You can and you will. Ain't a discussion." Emma had drifted toward the window, running her fingers along the sill. She turned back to her mother and made a series of quick gestures with her hands. Graceful, deliberate movements I didn't understand, but Anne clearly did. "She says the light's pretty here," Anne translated quietly. I looked at Emma. The girl watched me careful, waiting to see how I'd react. "Your daughter don't speak?" "She's deaf," Anne said, and there was something defensive in her tone, like she'd had to explain this too many times to people who took it as a failing. "Born that way? But she understands more than most folks who can hear." I nodded slow. "Then she's smarter than half the men I work with." Emma's face didn't change, but Anne's shoulders dropped just slightly, tension I hadn't noticed she was carrying. That first evening, I made supper, nothing fancy, salt pork, beans, cornbread from a skillet. Anne tried to help, but I waved her off. "You've been on the road. Sit." She sat, but her hands stayed busy anyway, mending a tear in Emma's dress with thread she pulled from her own hem. The girl sat cross-legged on the floor, moving her doll through some silent story only she could hear. We ate without much talk. The quiet felt natural, not strained. After, Anne washed the dishes without asking, and I didn't stop her. Some people need to work to feel like they're not charity cases. I understood that. By the time the sun set, Emma had fallen asleep in the bedroom, curled up on top of the quilt, still wearing her shoes. Anne stood in the doorway watching her, and I saw her hand come up to her mouth, pressing hard like she was trying to hold something in. "She'll be safe here," I said quiet. Anne turned. Her eyes were wet, but she hadn't let the tears fall. "Why are you doing this?" I thought about that. Could have said because it was right. Could have said because nobody else would. Could have told her about my brother, about the bank, about watching a good man crumble under debts he never should have carried. Instead, I said, "Because I got a spare room and you needed one." She studied my face a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She understood what I meant. This wasn't over. 2 days passed quiet. I went to the mill each morning, came back each evening to find Anne had swept the cabin, fed the chickens, started making sense of my kitchen. Emma helped where she could, carrying firewood, collecting eggs, sitting on the porch drawing pictures in the dust with a stick. On the third day, I noticed Pete Hendricks watching from the road when I came home. He was leaning against the fence post, chewing tobacco, not hiding that he was there. I nodded. He nodded back. "Heard you took in some company," Pete said. "Word travels." "Always does." He spit. "Hargrove ain't happy about it." "Hargrove can be unhappy all he wants." "He's been asking questions. Down at the store, at the church, wants to know if you're planning something." "Planning what?" Pete shrugged. "Didn't say exactly, but he's got people talking, saying it ain't proper, you living alone with a woman and child, saying there's laws about that kind of thing." I felt my jaw tighten. There ain't no laws against helping people. Maybe not, but there's laws about a lot of other things. Pete pushed off the fence. "Just thought you should know. Some folks are watching now." He walked off before I could answer. Inside, Anne was at the stove, stirring something that smelled like stew. She looked up when I came in, read my face. "Trouble?" she asked. "Maybe." Emma appeared in the bedroom doorway, watching us both. Her hands moved. A question. Anne's hands answered, then she turned to me. "She wants to know if we have to leave." I looked at that little girl, standing there in a borrowed dress, holding a half-broken doll, ready to pack up again because that's what her life had taught her. "No," I said. "Nobody's leaving." But even as I said it, I could hear horses on the road. More than one. Coming closer. The horses stopped outside my gate just after sundown. 3 riders. Tom Hargrove, Sheriff Cutler, and a man I didn't recognize wearing a county clerk's badge. I stepped out onto the porch. Anne moved to the window, Emma beside her. "Evening, gentlemen," I said. Hargrove stayed mounted. "We need to have a conversation, Brennan." "Then have it. Not out here. This is official business." Sheriff Cutler dismounted, his hand resting casual on his belt near his pistol. Not a threat exactly, just a reminder. "Silas, we got some concerns. Best if we come inside, talk it through civilized." I didn't move from the doorway. "Whatever you got to say, you can say it from there." The clerk cleared his throat. He was younger, maybe 25, holding a leather folder like it gave him authority. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Wesley Grant from the county office. We've received a complaint regarding your living arrangements." "My what?" "You're residing with Mrs. Ann Macklin and her minor child. You're not married, not related, and there's no legal guardianship on file." He pulled a paper from the folder. "State law requires—" "State law can go to hell." Cutler's face hardened. "Careful, Silas. I'm housing 2 people who needed shelter. Last I checked, that wasn't a crime." Hargrove finally dismounted, moving closer. "It becomes a crime when it involves impropriety. A man and a woman, unrelated, living under one roof. You know what people are saying." "I don't care what people are saying." "You should, because those people vote on town contracts. They decide which mills get county business." Hargrove's voice dropped lower. "They also sit on juries, Silas. You ever think about that?" The threat hung clear in the evening air. Wesley Grant stepped forward, trying for a softer tone. "Mr. Brennan, nobody wants trouble. We just need to ensure everything's proper. If you and Mrs. Macklin were to formalize the arrangement, marriage perhaps, or legal guardianship of the child, then there wouldn't be any question. Inside, I heard Anne's sharp intake of breath. I'm not marrying somebody because you tell me to, I said. And I'm not signing papers because the bank wants to know who's sleeping where. Cutler shook his head. Silas, you're making this harder than it needs to be. No, you are. You're making it complicated because Hargrove wants that land back and he's using any excuse to get it. Hargrove's jaw tightened. This has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with it. That woman and her girl lost their home because your bank wouldn't give them time to grieve. Now you're trying to make it illegal for anyone to help them. We're trying to maintain order, Grant said. There are standards. Standards. I stepped down off the porch, close enough that Grant backed up a step. You want to talk about standards? A man works his whole life, builds something, and when he dies, you take it from his widow and child before he's even cold in the ground. That's your standard. Sheriff Cutler's hand moved closer to his pistol. That's enough, Silas. Is it? Because I'm just getting started. The door opened behind me. Anne stepped out onto the porch, Emma behind her. Stop, Anne said quietly. I turned. She was looking at me, not them. They're right, she said. This isn't proper. Emma and I should go. No, Silas. I said no. I looked back at the three men. You want to arrest me for helping people? Then do it. But they're not leaving, and I'm not signing anything just to make your paperwork easier. Cutler and Hargrove exchanged looks. Grant shuffled his papers, clearly uncomfortable. Finally, Hargrove spoke. You've got until Sunday to make this right. Get married, file guardianship, or vacate one of you. After that, we'll be back with a warrant. For what? Moral turpitude. Contributing to the delinquency of a minor. We'll figure it out. He mounted his horse. 3 days, Brennan. Make the choice. They rode off, leaving dust hanging in the evening air. Anne's voice came quiet behind me. You shouldn't have done that. I turned. She was standing with her arms wrapped around herself, Emma pressed against her side. Should have let them take you? I asked. You should have let us go before it came to this. Is that what you want? To go? She didn't answer right away. Emma's hands moved, a question I couldn't read. Anne's hands answered, slow and deliberate. She asked if you're in trouble because of us, Anne translated. I knelt down so I was eye level with Emma. The girl watched me serious, waiting. I didn't know how to sign, so I just spoke slow and clear, hoping she could read something in my face. I'm not in trouble, and nobody's making you leave. Emma's eyes moved to her mother, questioning. Anne looked at me for a long moment. Then her hands moved, translating what I'd said. Emma nodded once, solemn, then reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were small and cold. Anne's voice came barely above a whisper. You have 3 days to decide if you want a ready-made family. I already decided. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I stood, still holding Emma's hand. Sunday morning, we'll go to the county office. We'll file whatever papers they want. Guardianship, custody, whatever makes this legal. And if that's not enough? I looked at her straight. Then we'll figure out what is. Inside, the lamp flickered. Outside, the last light was leaving the sky. And somewhere down the road, 3 men were deciding what kind of trouble they could bring to a man who wouldn't bend. But I wasn't bending. Not for them. Not for anyone. Saturday morning came cold and gray. I woke before dawn, started the fire, put coffee on. Anne was already up, sitting at the table with her hands folded, staring at nothing. You sleep? I asked. Some. Emma was still in the bedroom, curled under the quilt I could see through the open door. The girl had cried herself to sleep the night before, though she made no sound doing it, just tears running down her face while her mother held her. I poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of Anne. She wrapped her hands around it but didn't drink. We could leave tonight, she said, before Sunday. Just pack the wagon and go. Go where? I don't know. South, maybe. My sister's in Tennessee, but we haven't spoken in. She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter. We'd figure something out. You'd be on the road again. no money, no papers, no way to prove who you are. We'd be free of this. Would you? I looked at her straight. Or would you just be running until the next town, the next banker, the next man with a badge tells you to move along? She had no answer for that. I stood, pulled on my coat. I'm going into town. Need to talk to somebody. Who? Judge Thornton. He's been on the bench 30 years. If anyone knows a way through this that doesn't end with you on the road, it's him. Anne's face showed doubt. You think he'll help? I think he'll tell me the truth. That's more than most will do. The ride into Red River took an hour. Main Street was quiet, too quiet. I passed Carmichael's store and saw 3 men standing outside, conversation stopping when they spotted me. Pete Hendricks was one of them. He nodded but didn't wave. At the courthouse, I found Judge Thornton in his office, reading through a stack of property disputes. He was 70 if he was a day, white hair, hands spotted with age, but his eyes were still sharp. Silas Brennan, he said when I walked in. Figured I'd be seeing you. Word's gotten around then. Word got around before you brought that woman home. He gestured to a chair. Sit. Tell me what you're planning to do about it. I sat. I'm planning to file guardianship papers for the girl. Make it legal. And Mrs. Macklin? Haven't figured that part yet. Thornton leaned back in his chair, studying me. You know what they're saying about you two? I can imagine. Can you? Because I've heard everything from improper cohabitation to corrupting a minor to conspiracy to defraud the bank. He tapped his desk. Tom Hargrove's been making noise about pressing charges. Says you're harboring someone who owes the bank money. She doesn't owe them anything. Her husband's debt died with him. Maybe, maybe not. That's for a court to decide. He paused. But that's not really what this is about, is it? What do you mean? Hargrove wants that land back. The Macklin property sits between 2 parcels the railroad's been eyeing, worth about 3 times what the bank paid for it. If Mrs. Macklin's gone, disappeared with no forwarding address, the bank can sell it clean. No complications. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. So, this isn't about morality. It never is. Thornton pulled out a legal pad, started writing. Here's what you need to do. File guardianship papers for the girl. I'll approve them. As for Mrs. Macklin, you've got 3 options. 1, marry her. 2, hire her as a live-in housekeeper with a formal contract. 3, have her declared your ward, same as the girl. Can you do that? Declare a grown woman a ward? If she's destitute, without means, and without male relation to speak for her? He looked at me over his glasses. Yes, it's archaic as hell, but it's legal. I thought about that. About Anne having to sign papers saying she couldn't take care of herself. About making her dependent on me by law. She won't like it, I said. Probably not. But it keeps her here, keeps the girl safe, and gives you legal standing to tell Hargrove to pound sand. He handed me the papers. Think about it. You've got until tomorrow. When I got back to the cabin, it was nearly dusk. Anne was in the garden plot, turning soil that didn't need turning. Emma sat on the porch steps, watching her mother with worried eyes. I told Anne about the judge's advice. All 3 options. She listened without interrupting, then said, I won't be your ward. I know. And I won't marry you because a judge says we have to. I know that too. So that leaves the housekeeper contract. I nodded. You'd have legal right to stay. Emma would be protected. And nobody could claim anything improper. She turned back to the garden, drove the spade into the dirt. I'll be your employee. On paper. It's still what it is. She looked at me then, something fierce in her eyes. I won't be owned, Silas. Not by a bank, not by a court, not by you. I'm not trying to own you. Then what are you trying to do? I didn't have an answer that didn't sound like something it wasn't. Emma appeared beside me, tugging on my sleeve. Her hands moved, quick, urgent gestures. Anne translated, voice softer now. She wants to know if we're fighting. No, I said. We're figuring things out. Emma's hands moved again. She says, Anne paused. She says you're the first person who didn't look at her like she was broken. Something caught in my chest. Anne set down the spade, wiped her hands on her dress. I'll sign your contract, but this is temporary. Soon as I can find work, find a place of my own. Understood? I mean it, Silas. I know you do. That night, I sat on the porch while they slept. The air smelled like rain coming. Down the road, I could see lamplight in a few distant windows, neighbors who'd stopped waving, folks who'd decided I was either a fool or something worse. Tomorrow, I'd go to the county office, sign papers, make it official. But as I sat there in the dark, listening to the wind pick up through the hickory trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that making something legal wasn't the same as making it right, and I still didn't know which one mattered more. Sunday morning, I hitched the wagon before dawn. Anne came out dressed in the same patched dress she'd arrived in, but she'd mended it carefully, added a collar from cloth I didn't recognize, making herself presentable for the county office. Emma wore a clean pinafore, her hair braided tight. The ride into town took longer than it should have. Anne sat stiff beside me, hands folded in her lap. Emma sat between us, watching the road. Halfway there, Emma's hand crept across the bench and found mine. She didn't look at me, just wrapped her small fingers around two of mine and held on. I glanced at Anne. She'd seen it, but said nothing. At the county office, Wesley Grant was waiting with the papers already drawn up. Judge Thornton sat beside him, overseeing. "Mrs. Macklin," Thornton said, nodding to her. "Mr. Brennan's outlined the arrangement. You understand what you're signing?" "Yes, sir." "You'll be employed as housekeeper and caretaker. Room and board provided with a wage of," he glanced at the paper, "$12 monthly." I hadn't discussed wages with Anne. I'd written in 12 because it seemed fair. She didn't flinch at the number. "And guardianship of the child goes to Mr. Brennan," Thornton continued, "with your consent as mother. That means he's legally responsible for her welfare, education, and protection." Anne's voice came quiet but steady. "He's already been protecting her." Thornton studied her face. "You're certain about this?" "I'm certain." He slid the papers across. "Then sign here and here." Anne signed without hesitation. I signed after. Emma watched the whole thing, solemn and silent. Grant collected the papers, stamped them official. "That should satisfy any concerns about impropriety." "Should," Thornton said, "but probably won't." Anne looked up sharp. "What does that mean?" The judge leaned back. "It means Tom Hargrove doesn't care about paperwork. He cares about that land, and as long as you're alive and could potentially make a claim on it, you're a problem he wants solved. But the debt's settled. Bank took the property. But if you were to challenge the foreclosure, argue your husband wasn't given proper notice, that the terms were predatory," he shrugged, "you'd have standing. Not much, but enough to tie things up in court for months, maybe years." I felt my jaw tighten. "So, this doesn't end it?" "No. This just makes you harder to move." We rode back in silence. Emma had fallen asleep against my shoulder, her weight warm and trusting. Anne stared out at the passing fields. "I should have known," she said finally, "that being legal wouldn't make us safe." I didn't have an answer for that. Back at the cabin, Anne went straight to the kitchen and started pulling out flour, lard, the last of the sugar. Her hands moved fast, angry almost. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Making dinner?" "That's what housekeepers do, isn't it?" "Anne, I signed your contract. I took your wages, so I'll earn them." She slammed the bowl down on the table hard enough to crack it, then stopped, staring at the split running through the ceramic. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean—" "It's just a bowl." "It's not just a bowl." She pressed her palms flat on the table. "Nothing's just anything anymore. Everything means something else. This cabin isn't a home, it's a contract. Emma isn't my daughter, she's your ward. I'm not a guest, I'm an employee." Her voice broke. And I hate that he did this. I hate that he took everything and now I have to. She stopped, covered her face with her hands. Emma appeared in the doorway. She saw her mother's shoulders shaking and moved fast, wrapping her arms around Anne's waist. I stood there, useless, watching them hold each other. Then Emma let go of her mother and came to me. She took my hand and pulled me forward until I was standing close to Anne. Emma's hands moved, fast, insistent gestures. Anne looked up, wiped her eyes. She says you're good. She says we're safe here. I don't feel safe, Anne said quietly. Emma's hands moved again, more emphatic. Anne almost smiled. She says feeling safe isn't the same as being safe, and we're both. The girl looked at me, waiting. I didn't know what to say, so I just put my hand on Anne's shoulder. Light, asking permission. She didn't pull away. You don't have to earn anything, I said. The contract's just words on paper. It doesn't change what this is. What is this? Shelter. For as long as you need it. Anne turned, looked up at me. And when I don't need it anymore? Then you'll leave, and I won't stop you. Something shifted in her expression. Not gratitude exactly. Something more complicated. Emma tugged on both our hands, pulled us closer together, then nodded once like she'd solved a problem. Anne laughed, short, surprised. She's decided we're a family now. Has she? She's 8. She doesn't understand. Maybe she understands better than we do. Anne went still. Our faces were close now, close enough that I could see the faint scar above her eyebrow, the exhaustion in the lines around her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw that said she'd survived worse than this and would keep surviving. I can't give you anything, she said. I've got nothing left. I'm not asking for anything. Everyone asks eventually. Then I'm not everyone. She held my gaze a long moment, searching, then nodded once, like she'd decided something. Emma smiled, satisfied with whatever she'd accomplished. That evening, Pete Hendricks rode up again. This time, he didn't get off his horse. Silas, he called from the road. Need to tell you something. I walked out. What is it? Hargrove met with the railroad men yesterday, right after you left the county office. Pete's face was grim. They're offering him twice what the Macklin land's worth if he can deliver it free and clear by month's end. Month's end is 2 weeks away. I know. Pete looked toward the cabin where Anne stood in the doorway. He's not going to let this go, Silas. Papers or no papers. What's he planning? Don't know exactly, but I heard him talking to the sheriff about investigating fraud. Something about forged signatures on the original deed. My blood went cold. The deed's legitimate. Maybe, maybe not. But while they're investigating, they can freeze the property. Keep anyone from claiming it. He turned his horse. Just thought you should know. Things are about to get worse before they get better. He rode off, leaving dust and dread in his wake. Inside, Anne was putting Emma to bed. She came out, saw my face. What happened? I told her. She sank into a chair. They're going to say my husband forged the deed, that we never had legal right to the land at all. Would they do that? They'd do anything. Her hands trembled. And I can't prove otherwise. All the papers burned when they… She stopped. When they torched our house. They torched it? She looked up, surprised she'd said it out loud. I told you they burned our shelter. I didn't tell you it was deliberate. Anne. They wanted us gone. So they made sure we had nothing to come back to. Her voice went flat. Now they'll erase us completely. Say we were never there at all. I knelt beside her chair. That's not going to happen. You can't stop them. Maybe not. But I can slow them down long enough to find proof. There is no proof. It's all gone. Then we'll find another way. She looked at me with hollow eyes. Why are you doing this? Because it's right. That's not a good enough reason. Not for what this is going to cost you. I took her hand. She didn't pull away. Then I'm doing it because Emma grabbed my hand this morning and held on like I mattered. Because you signed those papers even though it killed your pride. Because… I stopped. Because what? she whispered. Because you're here, and I don't want you to leave. The words sat between us, simple and true. Anne's fingers tightened around mine. They're going to destroy you for this. Let them try. Outside, the night had gone dark and still. And somewhere in town, Tom Hargrove was planning his next move. But here, in this cabin, a man and a woman and a deaf child had just become something stronger than paper could name. And that, I figured, was worth fighting for. Monday morning, I rode out to the old Macklin property. Hadn't been there since the foreclosure, didn't see much point before. But if they were going to claim the deed was forged, I needed to know what was left. The house was gone, burned down to the foundation stones like Anne had said. What remained was charred timber and ash already growing over with weeds. The barn still stood, though the roof had caved in on one side. I walked through what used to be the main room, kicking aside debris, looking for anything, papers, a strongbox, something that might prove the Macklins had owned this land legal and proper. Found nothing but nails and broken glass. "You're trespassing," I turned. A man stood at the property line, maybe 60 years old, wearing dungarees and a straw hat. I didn't recognize him. "This is bank property now," I said. "I got permission to look." "From who?" "From myself. I'm considering buying it." The man walked closer, studying my face. "You're Brennan, the one housing Anne Macklin and her girl." I straightened. "That's right." "Heard about that. Heard Hargrove's giving you trouble over it." "He's giving her trouble. I'm just in the way." The man looked at the burned foundation, shook his head. "James Macklin was a good man. Worked this land honest. Didn't deserve what happened." "You knew him?" "Neighbor. My property's just over that ridge." He pointed south. "Name's Virgil Eames. Used to help James with harvest season. He'd return the favor come winter." Something in the way he said it made me pause. "You were here when they burned the house?" Virgil's jaw tightened. "I was here. Not much I could do about it. 6 men with torches and guns, claiming they were clearing out squatters. Anne and Emma had already run by then. Smart woman. She knew when to leave." "6 men," I said. "Hargrove leading them?" "Hargrove paid them. Didn't dirty his own hands." Virgil spat in the dirt. "Been sitting on what I saw for 2 months now. Figured it wasn't my business. Then I heard you took them in, and I figured maybe it is. You'd testify to that." "The arson?" "If it came to it." He looked at me hard. "But I got something better. Wait here." He walked back toward the ridge, disappeared over it. I stood in the ruins, heart beating faster than it should. 10 minutes later, Virgil returned carrying a metal box about the size of a Bible. Rusted, dented, but intact. "Found this the day after the fire," he said. "Was going to bring it to Anne, but I didn't know where she'd gone. Figured it might be important, so I kept it safe." He handed it to me. The lock was broken, lid loose. Inside were papers. Deeds, marriage certificate, bill of sale for livestock, letters from the county office. And at the bottom, a land survey map with James Macklin's signature, dated 1928, stamped official by the county assessor. My hand shook holding it. "This proves ownership," I said. "That's what I figured." Virgil scratched his jaw. "Question is, what are you going to do with it? Keep Anne from losing everything twice." He nodded slow. "Are you sweet on her?" I looked up. "That relevant?" "Might be. Woman's been through hell. Last thing she needs is someone making promises he can't keep." "I'm not making promises, I'm just—" "Helping?" Virgil smiled, but it wasn't unkind. "Son, nobody helps this much unless it's personal. Just make sure you know what you're getting into. Hargrove don't like losing, and he's got the sheriff, the bank, and half the county in his pocket. He doesn't have Judge Thornton." "No, he doesn't. But Thornton's one man, and he's old." Virgil turned to leave, then stopped. "You need someone to stand with you when this goes to court. And it will. You come find me. I'll tell them what I saw that night." "Why would you do that?" "Because James Macklin deserved better, and because I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by men who think money makes them right." He tipped his hat. "You take care of that woman and her girl. They've had enough trouble." He walked back over the ridge, leaving me standing in the ruins with a box full of hope. Back at the cabin, Anne was hanging laundry when I rode up. Emma was sitting on the porch with a slate and chalk I'd bought her in town, practicing letters. I climbed down, carrying the metal box. Anne saw it and went still. "Where did you find that?" "Your neighbor, Virgil Eames. He's had it since the fire." She dropped the wet shirt she'd been hanging, walked over slow like the box might disappear if she moved too fast. I opened it, showed her the papers. Her hand came up to her mouth. The deed, the survey, James's signature. Her voice broke. "I thought it was all gone." "It's not gone. And it proves everything. That you own the land. That the foreclosure timing was wrong. That Hargrove can't claim fraud." Emma appeared beside us, tugging on her mother's skirt. Anne's hands moved, signing something quick. Emma's eyes went wide, then she smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. Anne looked at me, and for the first time since she'd arrived, there wasn't fear in her face, just something like hope. "This changes things," she said. "It does. We can fight him now, really fight him. We can try." She reached out, put her hand on my arm. "Silas, why are you doing this?" I'd been asked that question 3 times now. Each time I gave a different answer. This time I told the truth. Because I'm tired of being alone, and because when you showed up at my gate, it felt like maybe I didn't have to be anymore. Anne's hand tightened on my arm. "That's not a good reason to go to war with Tom Hargrove." "Maybe not. But it's my reason." She studied my face a long moment. Then, slow and deliberate, she leaned up and kissed me. Brief, soft, but certain. When she pulled back, Emma was grinning. "She's been wanting me to do that since Sunday," Anne said quietly. "Has she?" 8-year-olds see things adults try to hide. Anne stepped back, picked up the laundry she'd dropped. "We should take these papers to Judge Thornton. Tomorrow morning." "Agreed." "And Silas?" She looked back at me. "Thank you. For everything." "You don't have to." "I know I don't. But I'm saying it anyway." That evening, after Emma was asleep, Anne and I sat on the porch. The night was clear, stars thick overhead. "What happens if we win?" she asked. "You get your land back. You and Emma can rebuild." "And you?" I didn't answer right away. "I go back to my sawmill, my cabin, my life. Alone." That was always the plan. She was quiet a long moment. "Plans change. Do they?" "They should." She stood, moved to the door. "Good night, Silas." "Anne?" She looked back. "When this is over," I said, "when you've got your land back and you're rebuilding, if you wanted help, I'd be willing." She smiled, sad and hopeful at once. "I'll keep that in mind." She went inside. I stayed on the porch, staring at the stars. Down the road, a horse whinnied. Then another. Riders, more than one, moving slow through the dark. I stood, hand moving to the rifle by the door. The riders passed without stopping. But I stayed there until dawn, watching, waiting. Because hope was one thing, safety was another, and we weren't safe yet. Tuesday morning, Judge Thornton's office was already full when we arrived. Anne, Emma, and I sat on one side. Across the room, Tom Hargrove stood with his lawyer, a thin man from the county seat named Crawford who looked like he'd never gotten dirt under his fingernails. Sheriff Cutler leaned against the back wall, arms crossed. Thornton sat behind his desk, the metal box open in front of him, papers spread out like evidence at a crime scene. "Let's be clear what we're here to discuss," Thornton said. "Mr. Hargrove claims the Macklin deed was fraudulent. Mr. Brennan has produced documents suggesting otherwise. We're here to determine which claim has merit." Crawford stepped forward. "Your Honor, the bank's position is straightforward. James Macklin failed to make payments for 6 consecutive months. Under territorial law, that constitutes abandonment of contract. The property reverted legally." "Except he didn't abandon it," I said. "He died." "Death doesn't nullify debt, Mr. Brennan." "No, but it gives the widow time to settle affairs. The bank foreclosed 11 days after James was buried." 11 days. Hargrove spoke up. The debt was in arrears before Mr. Macklin's unfortunate passing. We showed considerable patience. Anne's hand tightened on her skirt, but she didn't speak. Judge Thornton picked up one of the papers from the box. This is the original survey, dated 1928, showing James Macklin purchased 160 acres from the territorial office for $320, paid in full. He looked at Hargrove. That's not in dispute, is it? The purchase isn't in dispute, Crawford said smoothly. The subsequent loan is. Mr. Macklin borrowed against the property in 1933. He defaulted. Simple as that. He didn't default, Anne said, voice quiet but clear. He died trying to prevent it. Everyone turned to look at her. He was hauling timber, she continued. Night run to make extra money for the payment. The wagon overturned on the pass. They found him 3 days later. Her voice didn't waver. He died trying to pay your bank, Mr. Hargrove, and you foreclosed before I could even. She stopped, swallowed hard. Emma reached for her mother's hand. Crawford cleared his throat. Tragic as that may be, Mrs. Macklin, it doesn't change the legal. It changes everything, I said, because the loan documents show payment was due on March 28th. James died on March 15th. He had 13 days left. The bank filed foreclosure on March 16th, one day after his death, 12 days before the payment was even late. The room went silent. Hargrove's face reddened. That's not. It's right here. I pulled the loan paper from the box, held it up. Signed by your predecessor at the bank, stamped by the county. Due date, March 28, 1934. Foreclosure filed, March 16, 1934. Crawford took the paper, studied it. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Judge Thornton leaned back. Mr. Crawford? I'll need to verify these dates with bank records. You do that. In the meantime, this court is suspending any transfer of the Macklin property pending investigation. Thornton looked at Hargrove. That means no sale to the railroad or anyone else until this is resolved. Hargrove stood abruptly. Judge, that property is bank asset. That property is in legal dispute. And until we establish whether the foreclosure was premature, it stays frozen. Thornton gathered the papers. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Mr. Crawford, you'll present the bank's payment records. Mr. Brennan, you'll present any additional documentation Mrs. Macklin has regarding her husband's death and his payment attempts. Your Honor, Crawford said carefully, if the foreclosure was indeed filed prematurely, what remedy does the court contemplate? Thornton looked at Anne. If James Macklin died with 13 days left to pay, and the bank seized the property before that deadline, then the foreclosure is void. The property would revert to Mrs. Macklin. Anne's breath caught. That's, Hargrove started. That's the law, Thornton said firmly, and if you don't like it, Tom, you can take it up with the territorial court. But in my courtroom, we follow the law as written. Hargrove and Crawford left without another word. The sheriff followed them out. When we were alone, Anne turned to me. Her eyes were wet. We might get it back, she whispered. The land, the house, everything. Might, I said. Still got 2 weeks to get through. Emma tugged on my sleeve, her hands moving in quick gestures. Anne translated, smiling through tears. She says you're a good man. I just read the dates on a paper. You did more than that. Anne stood, and for a moment I thought she might hug me, but instead she just placed her hand over mine. You stood with us, when no one else would. Judge Thornton cleared his throat. Mrs. Macklin, a word of advice. Those 2 weeks before reconvening, Hargrove's going to use them. He'll look for any way to discredit those papers, to find errors, to build a case that James was in default before he died. There are no errors, Anne said. Maybe not, but he'll try. You need to be ready for whatever he brings. We rode home in late afternoon light. Emma sat between us, drawing shapes in the dust on her dress. Anne was quiet, thoughtful. What are you thinking? I asked. That 2 weeks is a long time, that Hargrove's not going to let this go quietly. No, he's not. And that you've risked everything for us, your reputation, your business relationships, maybe more. I'm still standing. She looked at me. For how much longer? I didn't have an answer for that. That night, I sat on the porch after the women had gone to bed. The air was cool, carrying the smell of rain somewhere distant. I heard the floorboard creak, turned to see Anne standing in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" I asked. "Kept thinking about what happens if we win." She sat beside me. "I'll have land again. I can rebuild. Emma will have a home." "That's good." "Is it?" She looked at me in the moonlight. "Because I'll also have no reason to stay here." My chest tightened. "No, you won't. Unless I want to." I turned to face her. "Do you?" "I don't know. 2 weeks ago, I was a woman with nothing, running from men with torches. Now I'm sitting on a porch with a man who stood up to a bank for me, and I'm wondering if maybe I've been given a second chance at more than just land." "And don't say anything yet. Just think about it, about what comes after, if we win." She went back inside, leaving me alone with the stars and a question I wasn't ready to answer, because winning meant she'd be free, and being free meant choosing, and I didn't know which way she'd choose. The first 3 days after the hearing passed quiet. I worked at the sawmill, came home to find Anne cooking, Emma doing her lessons with the slate. We didn't talk much about the upcoming decision. Felt like speaking it aloud might jinx it. On the fourth day, Virgil Eames rode up with a wagon full of lumber. "What's this?" I asked. "Surplus from my barn repair. Figured if Mrs. Macklin gets her land back, she'll need building materials." He climbed down. "Thought I'd store it here till then, if you don't mind." I looked at the wood. Good pine, well cut, worth at least $40. "Virgil, I can't." "You can and you will. Consider it an investment." He tipped his hat to Anne, who'd come out onto the porch. "Ma'am, you're looking better than when I last saw you running from torches." Anne's face colored. "You saw that?" "I saw everything that night, and I've been carrying it around like a stone ever since." He turned back to me. "Which is why I'll be at that hearing in 10 days. And I'll be bringing my ledger showing I bought timber from James Macklin on March 12th, 3 days before he died. Paid him cash. Which means he had money for the bank payment." Anne's hand came to her mouth. "He never made it to the bank." "No, ma'am. The accident happened on the way. Money was probably in his coat pocket when they found him." Virgil's jaw tightened. "Sheriff would have logged it as personal effects. If Hargrove's lawyer is smart, he'll check that record. If he's not, I'll bring it up myself." After Virgil left, Anne sat on the porch steps, staring at the lumber pile. "People are helping us," she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. "Some people. That's more than I had before." The fifth day, Pete Hendricks brought news. He found me at the sawmill during lunch. "Hargrove's been going through the county records," Pete said, "looking for anything that might discredit the deed. So far, he's found nothing." "That's good." "It is and it isn't. Man who's got nothing left to lose gets dangerous." Pete lowered his voice. "I also heard he's been asking questions about you. Your army service, why you left, whether you're fit to be guardian to a child." My hands tightened on the saw handle. "What kind of questions?" "The kind meant to make you look unstable." "He's building a secondary case. If he can't prove the deed was fraudulent, maybe he can prove you're an unfit guardian and get Emma taken away anyway." "On what grounds?" "Doesn't need grounds. Just needs to plant enough doubt." Pete looked uncomfortable. "Silas, I need to tell you something. About your brother." I went still. "Hargrove's the one who foreclosed on Daniel's land 2 years back. I didn't connect it at the time, but—" He trailed off. "You're saying this is personal for him?" "I'm saying he knows you've got reason to hate him, and he'll use that if he can. Claim you're not helping Mrs. Macklin out of charity, but out of revenge." "And if that's partly true?" Pete studied my face. "Is it?" I thought about my brother, about finding him in the barn, rope around his neck, letter on the workbench that just said, "I'm sorry," about the foreclosure notice still pinned to his door when we buried him. "I don't know anymore," I said finally. "Started that way maybe." "But it's not why I'm still doing it." "Then you better make sure Thornton knows that, because Hargrove will paint you as a man using a widow for personal vendetta." That night, I told Anne what Pete had said. She listened without interrupting. Is it true? She asked when I finished. Are you helping us because of what happened to your brother? At first, maybe. I saw Hargrove's face and I stopped. I wanted him to lose something for once, the way my brother lost everything. And now? I looked at her across the table. Emma was already asleep in the bedroom, moonlight coming through the window, making everything look softer than it was. Now I'm helping because I don't want you to leave. Anne's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. That's the first completely honest thing you've said to me. I know. It's also selfish. I know that too. She stood, walked around the table, stopped in front of me. Good. Because I'm tired of people helping me out of pity or duty or guilt. If you're going to keep doing this, I want it to be for the right reasons. What are the right reasons? Selfish ones. Honest ones. She reached out, touched my face. Ones that mean when this is over, you won't disappear back to your sawmill and your solitude because your conscience is clear. I won't disappear. Promise? I promise. She kissed me then, not tentative like before, but certain. When she pulled back, she said quietly, 5 more days until the hearing. Then we'll know. Know what? Everything. Whether I get my land back, whether Hargrove gives up, whether you and I— She didn't finish. Whether we what? Whether we're just people helping each other through hard times or something more. I pulled her closer. I already know which one it is. Do you? Yes. Then tell me after the hearing. When it's real. When you're choosing it, not just reacting to crisis. She kissed me again, then went to bed. I sat up most of the night thinking about what she'd said, about whether I was helping out of revenge or love or some complicated mix of both. The morning of the 8th day, I found something on my porch. A note, unsigned, written in careful script. We remember Daniel. We remember what the bank did. You're not alone. I looked down the road. No one visible, but someone had been here. Someone had left this. Inside, I showed it to Anne. You've got allies, she said. I've got people who remember my brother. That's the same thing. Maybe it was. Maybe that's what community meant. Not everyone agreeing with you, just enough people remembering the same wounds. 2 days left until the hearing. 2 days until we'd know if justice was just a word or something real. And in those 2 days, I had to decide if I was fighting for revenge or for something worth building. I was starting to think it might be both. The morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn. Anne was already dressed, standing at the window watching the sky lighten. Couldn't sleep either? I asked. Kept thinking about what happens after? After we win? After anything. She turned to face me. Win or lose, today changes things. We can't go back to just waiting. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her best clothes, the dress Anne had mended so carefully it looked almost new. We rode into town together, the 3 of us on the wagon bench. Emma sat between us, her hand gripping mine the whole way. Judge Thornton's office was packed. More people than I'd expected. Pete Hendricks, Virgil Eames, folks I recognized from town, some I didn't. Even old Mrs. Carmichael from the general store, who'd stopped speaking to me after I took Anne in. Hargrove sat with Crawford, papers stacked in front of them. He looked confident. That worried me. Let's proceed, Thornton said. Mr. Crawford, have you examined the payment records? Crawford stood. We have, Your Honor, and we've found several discrepancies. My stomach tightened. The bank's ledger shows James Macklin missed 3 payments prior to March 1934. The loan was already in technical default. That's a lie, Anne said, standing. James never missed a payment. I have the receipts. Mrs. Macklin, Thornton said gently. Let him finish. Crawford continued. Furthermore, the cash Mr. Eames claims to have paid Mr. Macklin on March 12th, assuming it existed, was never deposited. There's no bank record of it. Because James died before he could deposit it, I said, or because the transaction never occurred. Virgil stood up from the back. I paid him $60, cash. Got my own ledger that shows it. A ledger you control, Mr. Eames. Hardly impartial evidence. Thornton held up a hand. Mr. Crawford, are you suggesting Mr. Eames is lying under oath? I'm suggesting his testimony is uncorroborated. Then perhaps this will corroborate it. Sheriff Cutler stepped forward from the back wall. He was holding a leather-bound book, the kind the sheriff's office used for property logs. Your Honor, Cutler said, when we recovered James Macklin's body, we logged his personal effects, including $58 in cash in his coat pocket. The room went silent. Crawford's face paled. That's not... It's right here. March 18th, 1934. Body recovered, identified as James Macklin. Personal effects, pocket watch, wedding ring, $58 cash. Cutler looked at Hargrove. Which means he had the payment money when he died. Which means the foreclosure was filed illegally. Hargrove stood. Sheriff, you never mentioned... You never asked. Cutler's face was hard. And I'm tired of watching good people lose everything because banks can't wait 2 weeks for a widow to bury her husband. Thornton leaned back. Mr. Crawford, does the bank wish to continue contesting Mrs. Macklin's claim? Crawford looked at Hargrove, who was staring at the sheriff like he'd been betrayed. Finally, Crawford shook his head. No, Your Honor. In light of this evidence, the bank withdraws its claim. Then this court finds the foreclosure was improperly filed and is hereby voided. The Macklin property reverts to Mrs. Ann Macklin with all rights and privileges thereof. Thornton looked at Ann. Ma'am, your land is yours again. Ann's hand came to her mouth. Tears spilled over. Emma jumped up and wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. I stood there, feeling something tight in my chest loosen for the first time in 2 years. Outside, people crowded around Ann. Mrs. Carmichael hugged her, apologizing for believing the gossip. Pete clapped me on the shoulder. Virgil shook my hand. You did good, he said. I just read some papers. You did more than that. You stood when everyone else sat down. Sheriff Cutler approached, looking uncomfortable. Brennan, I owe you an apology. Should have looked at those property records months ago. Why didn't you? Because Hargrove was my brother-in-law, and I let that cloud my judgment. He looked at Ann, surrounded by well-wishers. Not anymore. He walked away, leaving me standing there trying to process what he'd just said. Ann extracted herself from the crowd and came to me, Emma still holding her hand. We won, she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. You won. No, we won. She looked up at me. And now I have a choice to make. What choice? Whether to rebuild on my land alone, or... She trailed off. Emma tugged on my hand, then made a series of gestures. Ann translated, smiling through tears. She says we should build a bigger house. One with room for all of us. My throat tightened. Is that what you want? Ann stepped closer. I want to stop running. I want Emma to have a home that can't be taken away. And I want... She stopped, looked down. I want to choose something for myself, not just take what's offered out of desperation. Then choose. She looked up at me. I'm choosing to stay, not in your cabin, not as your housekeeper, as your wife. If you'll have me. The words hung in the morning air. Emma grinned. The crowd around us had gone quiet, watching. Ann Macklin, I said slowly. You're the stubbornest, proudest, most complicated woman I've ever met. And yes, I'll have you. She laughed, short and surprised, then kissed me in front of the whole town. When we pulled apart, Emma was signing something frantically. She says it's about time, Ann translated. 6 months later, the house on the Macklin property stood again. Not the same house, bigger, stronger, built with lumber from my mill and Virgil's barn and contributions from half the county. Built with a room for Emma that got morning light, and a porch wide enough for 3 rocking chairs. Ann stood in the doorway, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching Emma chase chickens in the yard. I came up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist. You thinking about names? I asked. I'm thinking about how close we came to losing everything. But you didn't. We didn't, she corrected, because you wouldn't let it happen. I just read some papers and got stubborn. She turned in my arms. You gave us back our dignity. That's worth more than land. Emma ran up to the porch, breathless and grinning. Her hands moved. A question. She wants to know if the baby will be able to sign, Anne said. We'll teach them, I said. Same way you're teaching me. Emma nodded, satisfied, and ran back to her chickens. Anne leaned against me. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing us, when everyone else looked away. I held her closer. The sun was setting over land that was hers again, over a house we'd built together, over a family that hadn't existed 6 months ago. I didn't save you, I said. We saved each other. And standing there in the doorway of a home built from ashes, I knew that was the truest thing I'd ever said. You know, I've been telling stories for a long time now. Some stick with you, some don't. This one sticks. Not because of the land or the legal papers or even the victory in that courtroom. It sticks because of what it says about who we choose to be when nobody's watching. When there's no reward coming. When helping someone might cost you everything you've worked for. Silas Brennan could have turned those women away. Had every practical reason to. But he looked at a widow and a deaf child standing in the dust, and he saw what they were. Human beings who'd been ground down by a system that valued property over people. And he decided that wasn't right. Now, I'm not saying he was a saint. Man had his own demons, his own grief, his brother's death hanging over him like a shadow. Maybe part of why he helped Anne was revenge against the bank. But you know what? Sometimes the right thing gets done for complicated reasons, and it's still the right thing. What matters is, he stood. When his neighbors looked away, when the law sided with money, when helping meant risking everything, he stood. Not because he was fearless, because he decided some things are worth the fear. And Anne, she didn't let desperation turn her into something small. She took the help, but she kept her dignity, signed those papers with her head up, raised her daughter to be strong. And when she finally got her land back, she chose love. Not out of need. Out of want. That's the difference. If you've ever felt like the world's designed to crush people like you, people who work hard, play fair, do right, I hope this story reminds you that dignity can't be foreclosed on. Family isn't always blood, and justice, real justice, doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being steady. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just refuse to quit, refuse to look away, refuse to let them grind you down. That's what Silas did. That's what Anne did. And that's what any of us can do when we decide we've had enough of watching good people lose. If this story touched you, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Until next time, may your dignity carry you through whatever storms come, and may you have the courage to stand for someone who needs it, because that's how we survive. Together.